I mentioned at the start of the show, we have Congressman Louie Gohmert joining us. He represents, I always think it's really symbolic. Congressman Gohmert represents Congressional District 1 in Texas. He's a member of Congress. He's very beloved by conservatives. He's served in Congress since 2005. He's a graduate of Texas A&M. He received an Army scholarship and a BA in history. He served as class president there. He has Juris Doctor's law degree from Baylor in Waco, where he was class president there too. He served as U.S. Army Judge Advocate General's Corps, JAG Corps, at Fort Benning, Georgia from 78 to 82. He's also served as a state district court judge in Texas. And he was also appointed by Texas Governor Rick Perry to fill a vacancy as Chief Justice on the Texas Supreme Court in 2003. But the most important job he's ever had is, in my opinion, is he's now representing Texas in Washington, D.C. Hello, Congressman Gohmert.
Hey, Debbie, it's great to be with you. Of course, father and husband are pretty important. They may be at the top.
Okay, I totally agree. Don't tell your wife I said that. No, just kidding. I think you have a wonderful family. And yes, father and husband are very, very important things. But honestly, in this time when there's so much fear running around Washington, so much fear about the virus and the handling of it, and on my side of the aisle, Arkansas side of the aisle, concerned about what the breakdown, the shutdown of the American economy is going to do to our country. I mean, it's going to impact the fall election. So tell me about first, Congressman Gohmert, just starting out in Washington, D.C., do you get a sense among the Republicans you are in touch with, are people concerned about how slowly we're trying to reopen the economy, or how are your colleagues feeling about what we're doing to reopen America?
I think it's a big majority are extremely concerned that if we don't get things going again, we're going to end up not being able to. We'll bring down the country. We've never done this before. Shut down the country. You go back to the pandemic, the turn of the last century, that was tragic. Over 670,000 or so precious lives lost. But I can't help but wonder if maybe this is the first time in American history where we've allowed the federal government to shut things down, because maybe this is the first time in American history they have been so indoctrinated through schools and media that it's the first time people would have put up with it. I've reflected on the founders, guys that, as Dennis Miller said, were so upset over a tax on their breakfast drink, they went and risked being shot, burglarizing a ship and trashing their cargo. You think they would have reacted well if England had said, we're shutting everybody's business down for your own good because there's a disease we want to protect you from? I don't think those guys that risk their lives over a tax on their breakfast drink would have taken well to being told, you can no longer make a living. We'll get you by through government subsidies. So it is a very dangerous time. And we do want to take the coronavirus very seriously. And there are great advances, as I love this about America, great advances in trying to deal with this issue from a scientific standpoint. And that's fabulous. And there are new things that will be coming out in the near future, I feel sure, that are going to make it easier to deal with these issues. But there is great concern. The Democrats feel like they have, they couldn't do it through impeachment, through the Russia hoax, through the Ukraine hoax. But now, some of them have paid lip service to this may be the one that we can use to bring down President Trump, or at least defeat him in November. So it's being seen politically by a lot of people, and not just to save Americans. Gee, this is the chance to bring down Donald Trump.
Congressman Gohmert, I could not agree more. That was actually a great segue to my next question. I've been saying for weeks that the Democrats, is always wrong to say that the virus is a hoax, because the virus is real. It's horrible. People are suffering, and we want to do everything we can to take care of it.
You betcha.
But the policy choices we made to respond to it. They are being milked and exploited by the left in this country to harm the economy, to harm the president, to grow government, to end up where you have people with, this is the Democrats' dream, a growing dependency class, people waiting for a check from Washington. I mean, so you share, I want to have you talk more about your sense of how the Democrats are exploiting this crisis.
Well, it's the fact that Pelosi would sit on the bill for 2 weeks just to keep people's businesses afloat during this tragic time. And it is tragic. The loss of any life, the suffering that's gone with the coronavirus is tragic. And that leads us to other things that need to be done about China. So I'm hearing people who, even Democrats that have been nothing but Russia. They're going, we really do need to deal with this, our reliance for critical things on China, not to the standpoint that they would go back and remove some of the bills they've passed in the House, putting off limits areas where we get rare earth elements so that we have to rely on China, which has really a monopoly in so many ways on so many products. We're about 85%. I was hearing a briefing on China, our Chinese reliance for medications, about 85% for the ingredients of our most important medications. That's all got to change. Now, one of the things I'm hopeful about is that maybe this wasn't the death knell, but it was a wake-up call that we need to wake up, because China has talked about for decades, and Mike Pillsbury's talked about this behind the scenes. Look, we know we'll never catch up to the United States. You're so far ahead of us. You have so much more going for you. But, we'll make noise and we'll try. No, the whole time they were planning on bringing us to our knees. And we've gotten indications with that on medication. Maybe we ought to just cut off the United States medication. That wakes up Republicans and Democrats. Everybody understands that is a threat. Some may get to the point eventually that it seems to be an economic act of war, but it is a threat to American lives. It's very serious. And we're starting to hear a little more of that from Democrats. After Pelosi delayed that bill for 2 weeks, we had a number of Democrats saying, you know what? This isn't good for America. We got too many people that either need to start their businesses back up or they need to be able to get this loan. So I'm hoping it's going to make a difference on both sides of the aisle in the end.
I would love that idea. Your particular point about medications, we've on this show, we've had Rosemary Gibson, who wrote the China RX book, and other people talking about our dependency on China for medications. And one thing she points out, and I think you're alluding to it too, is China intentionally cornered the market on production of antibiotics. It wasn't like it just kind of naturally occurred through a series of events and deals. It was as people look back at it now, it was an intentional cornering of the market to where American manufacturers could not compete to create these pharmaceuticals at the same prices. China can produce things cheaper, so people want, and we just kind of went along with that, not realizing we were becoming so dependent on China. So I really hope there was a major turning of the corner on dealing with China and medications. I really do.
Well, Debbie, could I also make another point on not only have we grown in our reliance on China, but there are so many financial entities that are looking more and more to China. And of course, you've got, Joe Biden's family connection through his son, the money that he's made off of China. So many ways that China has corrupted our universities. Hopefully there'll be a move that China can no longer participate in the results of testing on our college campuses. But one breathtaking thing right now, we have billions of dollars of federal employees' money in what's called the thrift savings account. And I know at one time there was a grand and glorious retirement package for members of Congress back, but somewhere around early 80s, that was changed. So members of Congress have the same retirement as every other federal employee, but all of that money that we set aside, all of that's in the thrift savings program. And the board, I believe there are 5, the majority of the board are still Obama appointees. President Trump has 3 to get the majority, but they have not been put in place. And the Democrat majority of the board governing the thrift savings account, all federal workers in retirement, they have made a move. They're going to try to invest a huge amount of money in Chinese companies, including those that make their defense weapons and all kinds of things. These clowns are about to, unless the president's able to stop them, they're about to invest federal retirement money in the Chinese government companies that are at war with us or could someday be at war with us. We're going to use our money to fund enemy actions against us. That is insane. But hopefully President Trump will get his people in and stop it. But the problem is they could do that any day. They've set it up where they could make that investment any day. Just outrageous.
It is outrageous, and I could not agree more. And it's an astonishing thing too. I've heard people, in fact, Gordon Chang said this on my show fairly recently, that all the time we invest more and more, whether the program you're talking about, other ways we invest in China, we really are enabling the Chinese Communist Party and its increasing tyranny that they, America thought, whatever it was, 20 years ago, that kind of China was going to open up. And if we invested more, we would help them see the beauty of freedom and free markets. And we kind of help them loosen the stranglehold of the Chinese Communist Party and the people. But actually, that hasn't happened. And the more money we invest in China, the more we enable their very repressive, tyrannical government to grow.
It's so right. And some people on the other side of the aisle love to use the R word. They scream racist. This is not a racist matter with regard particularly to the investment. This is a matter of China being the one country that would be invested in if it goes through that doesn't allow information about the financial strength of these companies, where their money comes from. They don't allow any of the things that are required by Wall Street before you can make an investment like this. So it isn't racist at all. It's a matter of bookkeeping. We're prejudiced against investing in companies that don't allow us to know what their quarterly reports are, like we know in the U.S. And they're the one big country that doesn't allow that. We should never be investing where we can't know the background and the earnings and the losses, all of these kind of things. What are they investing in? So that's the explanation as why we ought to stop that until we get some kind of agreement with China and can make sure it's an enforceable agreement.
Couldn't agree more. I want to go back to coronavirus while I'm thinking about this whole issue in Washington, because I feel like when the virus first came on the scene, to our awareness, we chose a policy that was designed to protect Americans. We did not want more people infected. People didn't know how bad it was. They didn't realize whether or not there was where exactly it came from, whether it came from a bioweapons lab or the wet markets. They were concerned about what was built into the virus. But here we are, I don't even know how many weeks you count, 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks later, and more data are now available that show that the lethality rate is actually low. I mean, the people who actually pass on from it. Mm-hmm. And so there are people like, I've mentioned in the show, Dr. Katz from Yale, who's been saying we should have done this vertical interdiction, protect the susceptible, let everybody else go free. We've had Dr. Scott Atlas from Stanford, who's gone through making the same points. We've had Dr. I think it's Georgatos from Stanford. And so my point is, do you think any of those experts who are now saying okay, we're not going to condemn anyone for the policy decisions we first made at the start, but here we are now. Can we change course? Do you think any of those people are getting President Trump's ear or his team's ear where he might be willing to change course in America and pull back based on the idea we didn't have to crack down so hard to start with?
Well, I'm not sure the extent to which he's hearing from doctors like you mentioned that I think deserve to be heard. It's one of the things, and it's really tragic. In the book Born Again, Chuck Colson talked about how once you come into the White House as president, it is difficult to hear from mainstream people across the board because you're in a bubble. Now, President Trump does better than most presidents we've had in the last 50 years about getting out and hearing from people individually. And I've never had I've served under 3 presidents, and I've never had one that was as keen to know what rank and file members of Congress think about things too. I mean, that's just fantastic. But when you hear from government doctors over and over who know nothing about the economy, and they don't seem to know about the psychological effect of the human on the human animal. When they're isolated, they're put in solitary, even if it's in their own homes. You know, it's not like sending a kid to his room and he's got TV, stereo, internet, everything. You need that human contact. And we have been able to get a lot, just like you and I are doing here over the internet. But it's why some people say you ought to get, at least so many hugs a day. We need that interaction. We need that encouragement. And I don't know how the suicide rate is going nationally, but we do hear anecdotal evidence or indications at different places across the country where suicides are up and they're tragic. And even the decision that doctors could not do essential surgeries. And that's, I know in Texas that was decided from Austin. But I've been on conference calls, and one of them, a doctor said, I kept telling the guy, yes, he's in terrible pain, but it's not life-threatening, and he ended up killing himself. So, all of the policies, including the essential care by medical professionals, needs to be looked at. And I know that our governor is relaxing some of those requirements even today. He's making announcements about further reopening of Texas, including healthcare.
Yeah, he is. Actually, on the healthcare subject, that was one of the points that Dr. Erickson and Masahi who are from Kern County, California. They run the largest testing medical facility there, and they did a big, long video, which I played on Monday on my show, just describing I played little segments of it, but they were describing that what you're describing, that people with non-life-threatening but very painful conditions can't get care. Also saying there's been so much fear put out there about this coronavirus, and their view unjustified because it has a 0.03 lethality rate or some number like that. It's just very, very low. That even people who think they might be experiencing a heart attack, they've had patients tell them, well, I didn't think I should come to the hospital because I thought, what if I catch COVID-19 when I go there? I'm better off staying home. So truly situations where they should be seeking medical care and they would normally, there's so much fear out there about this virus that it's going to cause people to have deaths from unrelated health problems. So they're just, I don't know. Go ahead.
We know the most vulnerable, and you were alluding to that earlier. So those are the people that should truly have been protected. With regard to the lethality of the coronavirus, I was looking this morning. In Texas, the lethality is around, it's about 2.5%, which, as I understand it, is close to the mortality rate for most influenzas that we have seasonally and every season, including this year and next year. In New York, however, I think it was around 7.6%, which is of great concern. So whatever Texas is doing, it sounds like we're doing well, and whatever New York is doing doesn't sound like they're doing very well in bringing down the lethality rate. That is a serious matter. But those are all things to be taken in consideration. And I know you had concerns too that, gee, should we be so specific in the guidelines for who opens and who doesn't? And, you know, they are, as the president said, guidelines. And so I have no problem with them being specific when they're guidelines, as long as they're not deemed to be the law. And you don't start having universal sting operations trying to see who's following the guidelines and who isn't. So those are all matters. They should be guidelines. They should be recommendations. But we should not allow this to bring down our country. You know, Debbie, back after TARP, President Obama's first year in office, we had gone from, in 2006, I remember Democrats complaining, you're $160 billion in the red. There's no reason not to be balanced. And they were right, and they won the majority. And I think that was a part of it. So who would have thought just a few years later that we would go from 160 billion in the red to 1.5, 1.6 trillion in the red. And yeah, I know you remember because you've got such a great memory, but our debt got downgraded, and that normally causes the rates of our debt that we have to pay to go up. And now here in 1 year, in 1 month, you know, we're going approaching 3 trillion in just a month or so, and that's on top of a potential 1 trillion that was we were looking at having in the red just from this annual budget. So we are in grave danger of having debt downgraded that could end up causing us to pay more for interest rates than we do for, say, Social Security or Medicare or defense for sure. So this is really serious stuff. We've got to look hard at whether just what we're doing is enough to bring down our country. And let's face it, Democrats have been leading the charge for many years saying poverty kills. And what is this stoppage of our economy doing? It's creating poverty. It's creating unemployment. It's creating all kinds of problems. And if the Democrats had been right all those years they were talking about poverty kills, then they need to get serious about trying to open up more of what we can to stop poverty from growing.
I love the argument, actually, that the way we speak back, because it had so far has seemed in the course of this coronavirus challenge that the spending is through the roof in Washington, and there's always more being asked for and Republicans are trying to contain a little bit and trying to direct the spending toward people actually harmed by this virus problem rather than, I don't know, the Kennedy Center. But the Republicans are trying to be a little bit more contained. But I love your argument about afterward, we need to say, you know, after the virus threat is gone, which I don't think it has to be as far away as people talk about, but we have to be able to say, you know, we created tremendous poverty by shutting the country down. And the way to bring it back is to bring back our economy, bring back jobs, let people create. I hit one more point with you about this spending. Back when Obama was president, we had the big problem in 2008. And so we had a big new budget in 2009. I think it might have gone up 50% or something in that ballpark. So what happened then, unfortunately, was that spending was high because big problem in the stock market. But then the Democrats began to treat that amount that was the budget level set in 2009 as the floor, the norm. It isn't like they said, okay, that was a crisis, now we're back down. So we really have that problem here of having people say, well, look what we spent in 2020. Surely this is the new floor. And I mean, do you think that could be a problem?
No, I know it'll be a problem because history repeats itself. And if you go back, the Obama administration, after going between 1.5, 1.6 trillion in debt in 1 year, they were bragging, look how much we've cut more off the budget than any administration in history. Well, yeah, but you're still 1.4 trillion or 1.3 trillion over what we ought to be spending. So, like you say, it became the new floor, and we have been hovering around 1 trillion in debt in the red every year for a number of years now, and greatly preceding President Trump. But we never, if we got below 1 trillion in the red in any years since 2009, it wasn't by much. But we have got to get serious about that, because you can bankrupt a nation. Look at the Soviet Union. You can only spend your money so long that you don't have before things come down. And I hear a lot of people saying they're just printing so much money. Well, after TARP, some of us had a visit with the Fed, and I asked a simple question: well, how much more money are we printing now than we did, say 10 years or so ago? And I was told we're not printing really any more money, not much more at all. And I said, but there's so much more money in the system. Yeah. And I was told, and I quote, oh, well, we couldn't possibly print all the money we are creating. That was a wake up. Holy cow. We're not even bothered to print it anymore. It's now just new digits in the overall system, but there's no printed money to back it up. I mean,
oh my gosh, it's incomprehensible. It's ethereal or something out there. Okay. Well, I know you.
Matt Bernanke told us back at the time, we are not monetizing our debt. We are not buying our own debt. Well, it turns out they were providing money to a third party, is what some of us found out, and letting the third party buy our money or buy our debt with our money. So that was a little bit disingenuous to have heard that.
Yeah. I feel like I say this every time I talk to you. One more question. Okay. I swear. And then, well, first of all, I am, generally speaking, you're saying that you think the tone of the president's guidelines is about right. I mean, we're not going to go through it page by page. I printed it out and read it. I mean, you think it's about the level where it should be? No,
I think it is. I don't have a problem with it being specific, since they are guidelines. If they were more than guidelines, if they were orders from the president, then yes, I would have a huge problem with them. But since they're guidelines, and he's made clear that's what they are, and even, to the point that he can disagree with a governor when the governor opens things up, but he's not issuing a federal mandate to stop it. He just states his disagreement, and I think that's fine. But let the states and localities make their own decisions.
That's the point I want to get to. I'm concerned, as we're talking about, kind of woven through our discussion, the left is going to try to hang this, the coronavirus problem, our response, the damage to the economy, around President Trump's neck and say this is all his fault. I think the more he can signal to America, I can do guidelines because I have these great experts here, but it's up to every state. And ultimately, it really is up to the governors, and then whatever they choose to do on down the ranks throughout their states. But that's the main thing I would love to have is a clear, this is the governors, this is on their watch, on their desk, right, what they do, because then we are closer to our own, we American people are closer to our own governors. We can put more pressure there to say, as we're trying to do in Texas, open up, this has got to end. Right. Okay, but that wasn't my last question. This really is. Okay, here, and that was this. I've heard about different groups in Washington, one from Heritage Foundation, one is Steve Moore and others created a group that's Save Our Economy or Save Our Country or something like that. So are you aware of what they're trying to get at is, in this astonishingly, relatively speaking, short period, 8 weeks, we have gone through an amazing period in our country, amazing harm to our economy, a lot of things turned on their heads. And so people are saying we've got to do something. We've got to try to, we've got to look at all the aspects of these issues, all the challenges we have to face about spending and getting the economy working. Are you part of anything like that? Are you encouraging that? Are you involved in trying to help come up with some plan? I don't know whether that'd be the kind of thing you would do or not.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not part of a group other than members of Congress that is pushing, but we have got to reopen more of our economy because the consequence of letting our debt get out of hand where we can't get back on top of it would lead to dramatic poverty. It would lead to having a totalitarian government take over. And it basically opens the door for Orwellian type totalitarianism to take effect. And so, and the loss of life, there's no country that has ever brought about the loss of life that communist countries have, particularly the Soviet Union and China. So, yeah, some estimate 20 to 30 million deaths on the hands of Stalin, but Mao maybe twice that many or more. So we don't really know for sure. We just know it was tens of millions. So it is serious. And we have had the best government that God could ever allow any country to have. Many of the founders said that as much when they came out of Independence Hall in Philadelphia. They thought they felt the hand of God. They came to an agreement that is made for the longest lasting founding document of any country ever. And so it has to be protected. We've already set a record for length under this Constitution, and it bears more protection now perhaps than we have ever provided. We cannot move down this road any further toward a totalitarian socialism.
And that is a great and profound note on which to end. Congressman Louie Gohmert, thank you so much for taking time and joining me today.
Thank you, Debbie. Great being with you.
Great to see you, sir. Okay, stay in the fight.
That's a choice.
Okay, so friends, we are just so grateful that Congressman Gohmert is available today. I urge you to follow him if you don't on any social media. Follow he is among the most clear thinking, because of his background as a lawyer and as a judge and his immersion in the importance of the Constitution, one of the most clear thinking and articulate and passionate defenders of America and what this country is, which is the whole reason I do my show, is to defend the extraordinary, I always say the most unique experiment in human liberty ever to bless his earth.